The Copenhagen summit must be re-evaluated in light of the recent document dump by a whistleblower at the University of East Anglia's Climate Research Unit. What this leak has clearly shown is why the climate scientists peddling the hypothesis that changes in climate are driven by CO2 were prepared to delete their raw data rather than release it under a Freedom of Information request. Such drastic, not to say unethical, measures would never have been necessary had the raw data supported the hypothesis that these scientists had built their careers on. Furthermore, deleting data that was subject to a Freedom of Information request was not only unethical, but actually illegal. The extraordinary lengths that these scientists have gone to in suppressing any dissenting argument should permanently disqualify them from anything more demanding than washing test tubes for the remainder of their careers. The emails show collusion between multiple centres of climate science research to game the peer review system. They show how editors and even entire publications that dared to publish work that disagreed with them were intimidated and blackballed. They show how the reviewer selection process was cooked so that climate alarmists' work only ever had to stand up to inspection by people who already agreed with their conclusions. They show how these scientists worked to hide the decline in temperatures over the past 10 years. But amazingly, these emails, incredibly damaging to the credibility of the hypothesis though they are not the whole story. Even more damaging in scientific circles, and what I believe in the long term will do more damage to the hypothesis in general, is the long-anticipated release of the computer code with which Michael Mann created the now infamous hockey stick graph. Many casual observers would suppose that someone must have checked Mann's math long ago. But what most casual observers would be unaware of is that Mann has never released any of his computer models. In fact, as the emails show, he has spent much of the past 10 years fighting Freedom of Information Act requests to allow other scientists to check his working. Now this code is in the public domain, it becomes readily apparent why Mann was so desperate for his code never to see the light of day. It is because if you feed his program a data set containing all zero temperatures, it still excretes a graph in the shape of a hockey stick. Now, there are those who would tell you that this release of information is not significant, or that it represents just a few bad apples. They are either deliberately obfuscating, or they are simply not aware of how key the data published by this clique of scientists has been to every subsequent study of the subject. Literally thousands of academic papers have cited the Hadcrut research as the basis for their own work. If the Hadcrut data is bad, then it calls into question the results of every study that has used their fraudulent data. This is not some arcane side argument, it calls into question the very basis of the climate alarmists' argument that changes in climate are driven by CO2. What I believe we are about to witness is the slow-motion train wreck of the climate alarmism bandwagon. One of the wheels has come off and the entire edifice is teetering desperately towards the brink of discredit. Maybe all but the most rabid eco-fanatics will jump before it disintegrates entirely. However, the ultimate decision to jump will be a painful one for those that are heavily invested in the business of climate change alarmism. There are many interest groups who have good reason to love the hypothesis of climate change. The academics loved climate change for the grants. The city folk love climate change because of the margins in trading the emission caps. The power companies love climate change because now they get to farm green technology subsidies for commercially unviable energy sources. Politicians love climate change so much that they have already spent the money raised from the new taxes it will enable. Anti-capitalist groups love climate change because they can see that the proposals to deal with it will cripple us economically. The population control lobby, of all flavours, from forced abortionists to voluntary extinctionists, love climate change because they can use it as an excuse to control population. Proponents of big government love climate change because it gives them an excuse to tell everyone else how to live. The BBC loves climate change so much that it has, and I quote, come to the view that the weight of evidence no longer justifies equal space being given to the opponents of the climate change consensus. And really, what news organisation does not love a good public health scare story? For all of these interest groups, giving up the best argument to justify their agendas will prove a painful exercise. So painful that we now see many of these groups in full-blown denial. but studiously ignoring the implications of the leaked documents, while curling into a fetal ball, putting your fingers in your ears and shouting peer-reviewed study at the top of your voice, is not going to put the cat back in the bag. I'm sorry, BBC, I really am, but it just won't. Science is the one where you have to explain the data that disagrees with your hypothesis. If you have to ask the public to take your hypothesis on faith while suppressing your data, then it is, by definition, a religion.